What happens when a celebrity guest thinks they can control the narrative on live television? When they believe their royal connections make them untouchable? When they walk into a room full of seasoned hosts thinking they own the conversation? In just 29 seconds, one heated exchange would expose the truth behind a carefully crafted public image and leave millions of viewers witnessing the most uncomfortable television moment of the year. The View studio buzzed with its usual energy that Tuesday morning. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the curved desk, flanked by Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Sunny Hostin, and Alyssa Farah Griffin. The lighting was perfect, the cameras were rolling, and the audience was packed with eager faces. But today felt different. Today, they had a special guest host joining them. Howard Stern, the legendary radio shock jock, had agreed to fill in for one of the regular hosts who was out sick. Howard adjusted his headphones and looked around the set with curious eyes. This was not his usual environment. The bright studio lights, the daytime television energy, the predominantly female panel. But he was a professional, and he knew how to adapt to any situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Whoopi announced to the camera with her trademark smile, "we have a very special guest with us today. Please welcome Meghan Markle." The audience erupted in applause as Meghan walked onto the set. She wore a perfectly tailored cream-colored blazer and matching pants, her hair styled in loose waves. She waved to the crowd with practiced grace, that same smile she had perfected during her royal days plastered across her face. But something felt off from the moment she sat down. There was a tension in her posture, a sharpness in her eyes that suggested she had come here with an agenda. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here," Whoopi said warmly. "We know you have a lot going on with your various projects." "Thank you for having me," Meghan replied, her voice carrying that familiar California sweetness. "I always love speaking with strong women." Howard leaned back in his chair, studying the guest. He had interviewed thousands of celebrities over the decades. He knew when someone was performing versus when they were being genuine, and right now, every instinct told him this was a performance. "So Meghan," Joy jumped in, "tell us about your latest venture. We hear you have some exciting announcements." Meghan's eyes lit up, but not in a natural way, more like a switch had been flipped. "Well, Joy, I am so excited to talk about our new initiative. Harry and I have been working tirelessly to create positive change in the world. We believe that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility to use it for good." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "That sounds wonderful. Can you give us some specifics?" "Of course," Meghan said, launching into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "We are focusing on social justice, mental health awareness, and creating opportunities for underrepresented communities. The work we are doing is really groundbreaking." Howard raised an eyebrow. Something about the way she emphasized certain words, the way she seemed to be speaking in sound bites, rubbed him the wrong way. This was not a conversation. This was a promotional tour stop. "That all sounds very noble," Howard said, his voice carrying just a hint of skepticism. "But let me ask you something more personal. How do you handle criticism? Because let us be honest, you have faced quite a bit of it over the years." The question hung in the air like smoke. Meghan's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. But Howard caught it. So did the cameras. "You know, Howard," Meghan said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge, "I think criticism comes with the territory when you are trying to make positive change. Some people are not ready for that kind of progress." "Sure, but I am talking about specific criticisms," Howard pressed. "Like the way you handled your relationship with your family, your father, your sister, even Harry's family. There seems to be a pattern of burned bridges." The studio grew quiet. This was not the softball interview Meghan had been expecting. The other hosts exchanged glances, sensing the shift in energy. Meghan's posture stiffened. "I think that is a very unfair characterization, Howard. My priority has always been protecting my family, my husband, and my children. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions." "Protecting them from what exactly?" Howard asked, leaning forward slightly. "From your own family members who wanted a relationship with you?" "I think you are oversimplifying a very complex situation," Meghan replied, her media training kicking in. But there was ice in her voice now. Sunny tried to intervene, sensing things, getting heated. "Meghan, I think what Howard might be getting at is how challenging it must be to navigate family dynamics in the public eye." But Howard was not backing down. "No, Sunny, what I'm getting at is accountability. I have been doing interviews for 40 years, and I can tell when someone is giving me talking points versus having a real conversation." Meghan's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? You came here today with an agenda?" Howard continued, his voice calm but direct. "You want to promote your projects and control the narrative, but this is not your show. You do not get to dictate how this conversation goes." The audience was dead silent now. The other host looked uncomfortable, not sure whether to jump in or let this play out. "I did not come here to be attacked," Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. "I came here to have a respectful conversation about the work I am doing." "And I am trying to have a conversation," Howard shot back. "But conversation requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. All you have given us so far is a press release." Alyssa attempted to redirect. "Maybe we can talk about your experience transitioning from acting to royal life to your current work." But Meghan was not listening anymore. Her focus was entirely on Howard now, and the mask was starting to slip. "You know what, Howard?" she said, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "I expected better from a show that claims to support women. This feels like an ambush." Howard let out a short laugh. "An ambush? I asked you about your family relationships. That is, Journalism 101. If you cannot handle basic questions about your public actions, maybe you should not be doing interviews." "My public actions?" Meghan's voice pitched higher. "You mean protecting my family from a toxic institution? You mean standing up for myself when I was being treated unfairly?" "There it is," Howard said, sitting back in his chair with a satisfied expression. "Now we are getting somewhere. Tell me more about this toxic institution. Because from where I sit, they gave you a fairy tale wedding, a global platform, and a chance to make a real difference. And you walked away from it." The question hit like a sledgehammer. Meghan's carefully constructed composure cracked completely. "You have no idea what you are talking about," she snapped. "You have no idea what it was like to be trapped in that system, to have every move scrutinized, to be blamed for things that were not my fault." "So it was never your fault?" Howard asked, his voice dangerously calm. "None of it? The staff turnover, the family conflicts, the media battles? All of that just happened to you?" Whoopi finally stepped in, sensing things spiraling out of control. "Okay, let us take a breath here." But it was too late. Meghan was fully triggered now, and Howard had found exactly the nerve he was looking for. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Meghan said, her voice shaking with emotion. "This is the kind of harassment I faced every single day. The constant questioning, the refusal to take my word for anything. The assumption that I must be lying or manipulating." Howard shook his head slowly. "Nobody is harassing you, Meghan. I am asking you direct questions about your choices. That is what journalists do. That is what real conversations look like." The studio atmosphere had shifted from welcoming to electric with tension. Meghan sat rigid in her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Howard remained calm, almost amused by her reaction, which only seemed to infuriate her more. "You want a real conversation?" Meghan said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Fine, let me tell you about real conversations. Real conversations happen when both people show respect. Real conversations do not involve one person trying to tear down another on national television." Howard tilted his head slightly. "Tear you down? I am asking you to explain your actions. If that feels like an attack to you, maybe you should ask yourself why." Joy tried to lighten the mood, sensing the interview going completely off the rails. "You know, we have all had difficult family situations. Maybe we can find some common ground here." But Meghan was not interested in common ground anymore. Her media training had completely abandoned her, and the real person underneath was emerging. "Common ground with someone who is deliberately trying to humiliate me? I do not think so." "Humiliate you?" Howard repeated, genuinely surprised. "By asking you to take responsibility for your choices? Meghan, you are a grown woman. You made decisions that affected multiple families, multiple institutions. You wrote a book. You did interviews. You put your story out there. But now, when someone asks follow-up questions, suddenly you are being humiliated?" Sarah leaned forward, trying to be supportive. "Meghan, I think what Howard might be trying to say is that we all face scrutiny when we put ourselves in the public eye." "Do not tell me what he is trying to say," Meghan snapped, turning towards Sarah with fire in her eyes. "I know exactly what he is trying to say. He is trying to make me look like the villain in my own story." The audience was completely silent now, watching this train wreck unfold in real time. Some had their phones out, recording what they knew would become viral moments within hours. Howard chuckled softly. "I do not need to make you look like anything, Meghan. You are doing that all by yourself right now." "Excuse me." Meghan's voice cracked with indignation. "You came on this show expecting everyone to just nod along with your narrative?" Howard continued, his radio experience showing as he remained completely unflappable. "But that is not how this works. You want to be taken seriously as a public figure? Then be prepared to answer serious questions." Sunny tried to intervene again. I think we are all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a commercial break." "No," Meghan said firmly, holding up her hand. "I want to finish this. Howard, you seem to think you know my story better than I do. You seem to think you understand my motivations, my struggles, my truth, but you do not know anything about me." Howard leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "You are right. I do not know you personally, but I know what you have said publicly. I know the interviews you have given, the claims you have made, and I know that when public figures make public statements, they should be prepared to defend them." "Defend them?" Meghan's voice was getting louder now. "I should not have to defend my truth to anyone, especially not to someone who clearly has an agenda against me." "My agenda?" Howard laughed out loud now. "My agenda is good television. My agenda is honest conversation. Your agenda seems to be controlling every narrative about your life while never taking responsibility for any of the consequences." Alyssa jumped in, trying to redirect once more. "Perhaps we can talk about some of the positive impact you have had. Your advocacy work, your charity initiatives." But Meghan was locked in combat mode now, focused entirely on Howard. "You know what your problem is, Howard? You think because you have been doing this for 40 years, you can bully anyone you want. You think you can tear people down just to make good radio." "Bully you?" Howard's eyebrows shot up. "Meghan, I have been nothing but direct with you. I have not raised my voice. I have not called you names. I have not attacked your character. I have simply asked you to explain your actions. If that feels like bullying to you, that says more about you than it does about me." The other hosts were now looking genuinely uncomfortable. This was supposed to be a light promotional interview, not a psychological dissection on live television. "My actions do not need explaining to you," Meghan shot back. "My actions speak for themselves. I left a situation that was harmful to my mental health and my family. I chose my husband and children over an institution that did not value me. And that is a fine choice," Howard said calmly. "But then you went and did interview after interview, documentary after documentary, telling the world how badly you were treated. You turned your personal family drama into a global media campaign. That is not just leaving quietly, that is scorched earth." Meghan's face flushed red. "Scorched earth? I told my truth. I shared my experience. I will not apologize for that." "Your truth," Howard repeated, emphasizing the words. "See, that phrase right there is part of the problem. There is not your truth and my truth. There is just truth. Facts. Reality. And the reality is that everywhere you go, there seems to be drama, conflict, burned bridges." "That is not fair," Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. "You are painting me as some kind of troublemaker, when all I have ever tried to do is stand up for myself and my family." Whoopi finally stepped in more forcefully. "Okay, I think we need to take this down a notch." But Howard was not done. "Meghan, let me ask you something. In all these conflicts you have had, with your family, with the royal family, with former staff members, with the media, do you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, some of the responsibility lies with you?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Meghan stared at Howard with a mixture of shock and rage. Her breathing was visible now, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with venom. "How dare I what?" Howard asked, genuinely curious. "Ask you to consider that you might not be the victim in every situation? Ask you to show some self-reflection? You are trying to gaslight me on national television?" Meghan accused, her voice getting stronger and more emotional. "You are trying to make me question my own experiences, my own memories, my own trauma." Joy looked around the table desperately. "Maybe we should really take that commercial break now." But neither Howard nor Meghan was backing down. This had become a battle of wills, and millions of people were watching it unfold live. "Nobody is gaslighting you," Howard said firmly. "I am challenging you. There is a difference. You came here expecting softball questions and promotional opportunities. Instead, you got journalism. Real journalism. The kind that asks hard questions and expects honest answers." "Honest answers?" Meghan laughed bitterly. "You would not know honesty if it hit you in the face. You are a shock jock whose entire career is built on humiliating people for entertainment." Howard smiled slightly. "Maybe, but at least I am honest about what I do. I do not pretend to be a humanitarian while throwing my family under the bus for profit." The audience gasped audibly. Even the other hosts looked shocked at how direct Howard had become. But he was not wrong, and everyone in that studio knew it. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I do not have to sit here and listen to this." Actually, you do, Howard said calmly, not moving from his chair. You agreed to this interview. You came here to promote yourself and your projects. You do not get to storm off just because someone asked you uncomfortable questions. Watch me, Meghan said through gritted teeth, reaching for the microphone pack clipped to her blazer. But before Meghan could remove her microphone, Whoopi's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Sit down, Meghan. The command was delivered with such authority that it stopped Meghan in her tracks. Whoopi had seen every kind of drama in her decades of television, and she was not about to let a guest hijack her show. Sit down, Whoopi repeated, her voice firm but not unkind. We are going to finish this conversation like adults. Meghan looked around the table, suddenly realizing that she had no allies here. The other hosts were staring at her with expressions ranging from concern to embarrassment. The audience was dead silent, hanging on every word. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her meltdown for posterity. Slowly, reluctantly, Meghan sank back into her chair. But her posture remained defiant, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Now, Whoopi continued, Howard asked you a direct question. Do you ever consider that you might bear some responsibility for the conflicts in your life? It is a fair question, and I think our viewers deserve an honest answer. Meghan looked at Whoopi with betrayal in her eyes. I cannot believe you are taking his side. I am not taking anyone's side, Whoopi replied calmly. I am trying to have an honest conversation. That is what we do here. Howard leaned forward slightly, sensing an opportunity. Meghan, let me try a different approach. You talk a lot about being authentic, about living your truth. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you admitted you were wrong about something? When was the last time you apologized for hurting someone else? The question hit like a lightning bolt. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Her eyes darted around the table, looking for an escape route that did not exist. I apologize when I have done something wrong, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. Give me an example, Howard pressed. One specific example of you taking responsibility for causing someone else pain. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Meghan stared at Howard, her mind racing, searching for an answer that would not make her look worse than she already did. I do not think this is appropriate, she finally said, her voice small and defeated. Why not? Sarah asked gently. Howard is not asking you to reveal state secrets. He is asking you to show some humility, some growth. Because I am not here to be psychoanalyzed, Meghan snapped, some of her fire returning. I am here to talk about my work, my projects, my positive impact on the world. Joy shook her head slowly. But Meghan, your work, your projects, they all stem from your personal experiences. You cannot separate the two. Your entire brand is built on your story. Exactly, Howard said, pouncing on the opening. You want to monetize your pain, your struggles, your conflicts. You want to profit from your drama, but you do not want to be held accountable for any of it. That is not true, Meghan protested, but her voice was weak now, the fight draining out of her. Then prove it, Howard challenged. Right now, on live television, in front of millions of people, admit one mistake you made, one person you hurt, one time you were wrong. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every eye was on Meghan, waiting to see if she could rise to the challenge or if she would continue to deflect and dodge. Meghan looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her wedding ring. When she looked up again, her eyes were glassy with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. You want to know the truth, Howard? The real truth? Fine. Here at Island, I am tired. I am tired of being questioned, tired of being judged, tired of having to justify every decision I make. I left a life that was killing me slowly. And I am supposed to apologize for that? I chose love over duty, family over tradition, and happiness over obligation. And if that makes me selfish in your eyes, then so be it. Howard studied her face carefully. That is a beautiful speech, Meghan, very moving. But it is still not an answer to my question. What more do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. I want honesty, Howard said simply. Real honesty, not a performance, not a speech, not talking points. I want you to acknowledge that your actions have consequences for other people too. Sunny leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Meghan, I think what Howard is getting at is that growth comes from accountability. We all make mistakes. We all hurt people sometimes. The mark of maturity is owning that. I own my mistakes, Meghan insisted, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Alyssa nodded thoughtfully. Can you share one with us? Just one specific example? Meghan looked around the table again, realizing she was completely cornered. Every host was now aligned against her, not out of malice, but out of a genuine desire to see her show some vulnerability, some humanity. She started, then stopped. I wish things had been different with my father. There, are you happy? Howard shook his head. That is not taking responsibility. That is expressing regret about circumstances. Try again. I do not understand what you want from me, Meghan said, genuine confusion in her voice. I want you to say something like, I made a mistake when I did X, and I am sorry for how it hurt Y. Howard explained patiently. I want you to model the kind of accountability you claim to value. The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan sat there, mouth slightly open, struggling with a concept that seemed foreign to her. The idea of admitting fault, of apologizing without qualifiers, of taking full responsibility for her actions. Finally, Whoopi stepped in. You know what, folks? I think we have gotten as far as we are going to get today. But Howard was not ready to let it go. This is exactly the problem, Meghan. You came here to promote yourself, to control the narrative, to paint yourself as a victim and a hero. But real life is messier than that. Real people make mistakes. Real people hurt other real people. And real people take responsibility for that. I am a real person, Meghan said quietly, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Then act like one, Howard said, not unkindly. Stop hiding behind your brand. Stop performing your pain. Stop treating every conversation like a media opportunity. Just be human. The words hung in the air as Meghan wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. For the first time since she had walked onto the set, she looked genuinely vulnerable, genuinely real. I do not know how to do that anymore, she whispered, the admission so quiet that the microphones barely picked it up. And there it was, the moment of truth, the crack in the armor, the admission that her entire public persona was just that, a persona. Howard leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He had gotten what he came for. Not a meltdown, not a viral moment, but something much more valuable, a moment of genuine human vulnerability from someone who had forgotten how to be vulnerable. That, he said simply, is the most honest thing you have said all day. The cameras continued to roll as Meghan sat there, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding that her carefully constructed image had crumbled completely. Not because Howard had destroyed it, but because she had never built it on a foundation of truth in the first place. Whoopi looked directly into the camera. We will be right back after these messages. As the red recording light blinked off, the studio remained silent. Meghan sat frozen in her chair, staring at nothing, while Howard quietly gathered his notes. The other hosts exchanged glances, knowing they had just witnessed something unprecedented in daytime television. The interview was over, but the real conversation, the one about authenticity, accountability, and what it means to be human in the public eye, had only just begun.